signals are triggering this normal developmental loss. And that's what my project is about. And my hypothesis is that this 1/3 loss is attributed to something called apoptosis, which is a programmed cellular death, a mechanism essential for cellular organism survival. And it's triggered by many signal pathways, and the mitochondria acts like a bridge connecting those signal pathways to apoptotic pathways. Now, if I may. All right. There are two routes to apoptosis. My project is started here at the intrinsic pathway, and is triggered by many intracellular cues inside the cell. I am focused on BAX and BCL2 like 2 that alter the mitochondria, release cytochrome C, induce mitochondrial dysfunction, ultimately leading to something called apoptosis. Now, cellular survival is a balance of pro and anti-apoptotic gene expression. When the balance is weighed towards pro-apoptotic genes, cellular loss may occur due to apoptosis. BCL2, like 2, reduces apoptosis to cells that have been exposed to that cytochrome C that we saw in that cascade graph. BAX with an X influences mitochondrial membrane permeability by that cytochrome C, allowing it to get through that mitochondrial membrane. Now, I'd just like to remind us that I'm looking at this 1/3 cardiomyocyte loss 2 weeks roughly around birth. I must stress that this is a normal cardiovascular developmental process. So my aim is to look into whether BAX, which is a pro, and BCL-like 2 anti, is regulating that loss. All right, in order to investigate that loss, using sheep heart samples from the left ventricle, we crushed and purified those samples. Next, we use a nanodrop to assess RNA absorbance for the next step. Following, the biometric thermocycler, along with something called reverse transcriptase, was used to make cDNA. Now, once cDNA was made, I could officially start my project. And that's where a whole lot of qPCR came in. And this is what some qPCR may look like. So, in order to normalize data, stable reference genes are required. I looked at 9 reference genes in total, and these are the 3 most stable ones: beta-actin, GAPDH, and RPL37. Out of these 3, beta-actin seems to be more stable in comparison to the other 2. Analysis taking longer than expected. This is a result in which we are hoping for. My hypothesis would conclude that the balance is tipped towards pro-apoptotic expression before birth, leading to cellular loss, and after birth, balance tips towards anti-apoptotic loss, conserving that cellular population. This is an ongoing study. We are continuing to analyze the preliminary data of BAX and BCL2 like 2. The sheep is a gold standard model for perinatal heart development, giving milestones for cardiomyocyte proliferation and maturation that closely mirrors that of humans. The challenge of this animal model is that the molecular tools that are routinely used in more standard models like rats and mice require more troubleshooting and validation. So this study is important because since the moment we are born, the amount of cardiomyocytes we have are fixed. We can no longer grow anymore. Fetuses that have faced challenges during development, such as some born prematurely, and that face growth restriction are at risk of poor long-term cardiac health. I find this super important because I myself was a preemie twin. And if we can understand cellular loss during normal development, then we may be able to influence cell number in those most vulnerable fetuses facing adversity by giving them an equitable start to long-term cardiac health in comparison to their peers. I'd like to acknowledge both Exito, Portland State University, NIH, and most importantly, the Yonker Lab. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Does apoptosis happen anywhere else?
It does. Great question. Thank you. It actually happens in our brain. I'm not versed in that particular area of the body, but yes, it does in the brain.
So here and then here. So in the case of your hypothesis, would there be a way to prevent apoptosis from happening while the fetus is still?
That is exactly what we're hoping. So absolutely. Yes. So the hope is if we can understand those signals, then we may be able to promote or limit that apoptosis from occurring so that those cardiomyocytes can grow. Yeah. Thank you.
Was there a specific part of that you studied?
Yes, so we looked at the left ventricle. It's important because the left ventricle is the main source that's used in your heart. It pumps oxygenated blood throughout your body, whereas the right ventricle pumps deoxygenated blood to your lungs. And so that was the first one that we looked at because of regional importance.
Yes, I was wondering, so it being a heart have a different function versus just someone who isn't a preeclampsia? Is there?
It's a great question. No. Well, what I would like to say, I'm not versed in that, but what I will say is that this is a normal development, that loss. So everyone loses that loss. The important part is some preemies that are born, once they are born, they have a lower cardiomyocyte number in comparison to everyone else because they didn't have more time to develop, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any methods other than PCR?
Yes, I only looked at PCR, but there are some other methods called like Western blot that you can do, and that would be something that we could do as an experiment. Yes.
So you said public health path, and there's so many connections. So you are deep into the molecular biology. So you want to talk about some of your interests as how is this going into your general framework of the things that you care about and where you might want to go?
Great question. Thank you. Absolutely. I would like to help in research that lifts up voices in marginalized communities or underrepresented communities. And so this is kind of very intertwined with that a conversation that is starting to begin to happen, DOHAD and so things like that. So I would like to look into heart health or anything that's pertaining to underrepresented communities.
Okay. So a lot of people might not know what DOHAD is. Do you want to just briefly say what DOHAD is?
Great question, Dr. Hunter. Yes, DOHAD is social determinants of health. So looking into long-term effects towards fetuses or generations that have generations towards mothers and what they have experienced in their lifetime and how that influences their offspring long-term.
So it's a huge, beautiful new area of research, developmental origins of health and disease for sport. And it can cover so many different things. So like as we're kind of moving through these different areas, like how these different fields intersect is really, really important. So this is one of those areas. Hold on.
Thank you.
I have one.
Oh, sorry, that's a Matt and then Brady.
What medical conditions are associated with cardiac apoptosis, either pediatric or otherwise?
Great question. I am not versed in that. I can definitely look into that, and if you would like, I can send you an email and I will get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
First of all, great slides.
Yes.
Making great employees too.
Yeah.
I'm distracted by everything that can go wrong.
Thank you.
When did you start to feel like a researcher with the start of this project?
That's a great question. In fact, I would say that I initially felt like a real researcher in these past couple months. I have it written down. I have performed 19 qPCR experiments, and although that may sound not a lot, imagine a box with 96 wells times 19. So understanding why I'm using certain things that I'm using and what do they do in the process of analyzing this data in PCR, I felt confident in the past like 3-4 months. Yes. Thank you.
Beautiful, love that. Right after, that's amazing. So Alex, should we get next, just for, as we're doing these transitions? Absolutely beautiful. This might be one of my favorite segues of preparing. for
Daisha was in the chat and she
presentation.
says, great presentation. Daisha Wolf was watching.
Oh, thanks,
So-
Daisha.
Tell
her I said thank you. Thank you.
Like, you know that Rayasha like thought this through and not, you didn't know, right? That's like a mic drop of like. All right, so next up we have Alex. I love all the questions too. Hold on.
We all ready?
Of course, well,
Yeah, awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Alex Vasquez Cortez and I'm part of the Trauma Research Lab at OHSU, and I'll be talking about anxiety. So just to give some background on this research focuses on children's anxiety before they go through a surgical procedure at the hospital. And surgery, as you know, can be one of the most stressful times for a person, but just imagine how intimidating that can be for a child. So children are very likely to experience anxiety before undergoing procedures, and their families are also reciprocate that anxiety. And that's a problem because just being anxious and stressed just diminishes the experience that these families have in seeking care at the hospitals. And as of right now, it isn't well known what would be the best intervention and how to approach this issue. However, we believe that Exploro might just be getting another step forward to finding a solution. So what is Exploro? Exploro is a mobile application where kids are able to create an avatar, and with their avatar, they're able to explore a virtual hospital environment. And a fun fact is that the environment looks exactly like OHSU. So that way, when these children walk into the hospital, they're already familiar with the layout, staff, and equipment. And really, Exploro is really just normalize the hospital experience for these children. And Exploro has been shown to be effective for hospitalized patients. And we're hoping it has the same impact for patients at OHSU. So the objective of the study is to just see how effective Exploro is at reducing anxiety in children who are scheduled to receive a surgical or upper endoscopy procedure, and to evaluate the effectiveness of the app. We are looking at the anxiety levels, anti-anxiety medication usage, and the effect on previously hospitalized patients. And we hypothesize that Exploro would lead to a reduction in anxiety levels, a reduction in medication usage, and it would be significantly effective in children who have already gone through the surgical process in the past. So this is a cost-effective randomized interventional study. So participants are randomized into 2 groups: standard of care with Exploro or standard of care without Exploro. And we have an enrollment goal of 160 participants. And some of the variables that will be taken into account are the SCAI baseline anxiety survey to measure initial anxiety, the administration points of the visual analog scale at 2 time points. One would be when the patient is taken to the pre-op holding bed, and the other right before the patient is taken into the operating room. And the visual analog scale is a survey that we give to children on the day of the procedure to measure their anxiety on a scale of 0 to 10. And we're also giving a VAS to the child's caregiver and nurse to get additional perspectives on the state of the patient. We'll also take into account the amount of time the participant uses the app, as well as the medications that they are given. So here is the enrollment criteria that we use to screen for potential participants. So for instance, children have to be between ages 8 to 14, having a scheduled procedure at the hospital, they're English speaking, and we're able to obtain informed consent from the guardian and assent from the child. If children do not meet the inclusion criteria or they meet the exclusion criteria, then they will not be eligible to participate in the study. So here is a general overview of the workflow for this study. So once a patient is scheduled for a procedure at the hospital, the team screens that participant for inclusion, and then they contact that patient, and once consent and assent are obtained, then the patient will be enrolled into the study and then later on randomized to either of the 2 groups. And those randomized into the Exploro group will receive an access code to the app. Both groups will then be given a basic demographic and baseline anxiety survey. And once the day of the procedure comes, we will get our answers to the visual analog scales at the 2 time points. And once the participant is done with their surveys, their participation in the study is complete. So this is a new study, so we don't have any results at the moment. So, however, screening for potential participants is currently underway. But we overall expect that Explorer would lead to a reduction in anxiety levels, which would equate to a reduction in medication usage. And that it would be really effective in children who have already been through this process before. I'd like to end with that if Explorer proves to be effective, then it could then be used in all pediatric procedures. And the concept of the app may even expand to other age groups. But an essential factor to consider is that as of right now, Explorer is only available in English. However, the company that founded Explorer is currently working on translating it into multiple languages. So in the future, non-English speaking children may have access to the app. But overall, we hope that Explorer works as a useful adjunct to existing interventions that we currently have. And ultimately just be another tool to help children familiarize themselves and ultimately improve the hospital experience with them as they're seeking care at hospitals. I'd like to acknowledge Bill Exeter for giving me this opportunity, as well as my research mentors in Dr. Underwood, Dr. Shai Khan, the OHC Company Center, and my PI, Dr. Trey.
So I'm really on pitch, then repeat, and then over here, so just my eyes see that as we're going.
Can I ask why you chose or at the limit for each support team? Just because I'd imagine kids younger than me have to be a bit more scared because they have a hard time understanding what they might do.
Yeah, that's a good question. I assume that's also one of the reasons, just because we want children that are able to effectively use the app and able to understand and interact with it well. And also like the app, it's very colorful, it's very childlike. So like giving it to somebody that's, let's say 20, it's kind of like, we want to cater to the audience. So until, we have, all that sorted out, but that's what way is it.
Great job, thank you. Are you aware of any problems with accessing the app? I mean, I'm assuming that they're using their own phone or parents' phone. Is there a device available to give to people who don't have access to cell phones, that sort of thing?
As of right now, we don't have such a device. So that's why it's limited to only patients that have access. And that's actually one of the questions that we ask when we push for consent. That, hey, does your child have access to an app? Do you have access to internet to download the app?
My question is similar, also cross platform.
Is it cross-platform?
Cross platform.
As of right now, I don't think so, but I can definitely look into it and get back to you later.
Wait, so Natalie, I don't remember who had their hands up first, I apologize.
I have two questions. One is how soon before the surgery are they interacting with this? And my other question was, what is treatment as usual versus Explorer? Like, are there anyone that they talk to about their anxiety, or is it just like they don't get anything?
Yeah, so the amount of time, it varies per patient. Like for instance, like let's say a patient, we reach out to them and they have their surgery 2 weeks later, then they have 2 weeks. But then there are other patients that have like their surgery like in a day or two, but they still have access to the app and able to use it as much as they like. And as for your other question, from what I'm aware of, children are able to speak to a child life specialist just to talk about like their feelings and how they're feeling with their surgery. And we're just hoping that having that along with Explorer could just like hopefully reduce the anxiety that they experience.
My question is about other studies or other like anxiety reduction programs similar to this question that maybe influence research. Like, yeah, thinking about reduction of anxiety for children in hospitals or in other places. But is there other pieces of research that you're looking at to develop?
Yeah, so actually the Explorer app, we got it from like the company that made it and they provided it to us. And there is a research paper out there that's already been made on the app. So we based our study based on the current findings and we're just hoping to build off on it and just see, just to further prove that it's working.
That's what I see.
Yes, I was wondering, before they get to that point, do they give them are they able to see another doctor to get another opinion before they get to the surgical part of, so that it's some kind of acceptance, so that you're able to make a good decision for yourself,
Yeah, they absolutely.
So they do offer
The app. for.
To see
See
another,
oh,
another doctor for another opinion, basically.
yeah, for sure, they
Before
absolutely
you get
have,
to the surgical part.
they absolutely have that option.
Oh, okay, that's good, that's great.
I have one.
So great.
What was it that motivated you to pursue this project or this lab? And do you plan to continue in pediatric research?
Yeah, this research, like my research mentor Samantha, she brought it up to me in one of our meetings, and at that point, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, like in research, because there was just so many different things that we have available at our lab. But just this is the new concept, you know, this has to do with technology, and we all know how accessible technology is nowadays, and how children are very, you know, into it. And I was like, wow, this is just an amazing concept, just to have to help these children cope, you know, it's like surgery, like, I've been through it once, it's really intimidating, but just having this another avenue to just help these children, you know, just motivated me to pursue this. And as for the future, I definitely see myself doing like more pediatric research, but I also want to do research like for like other age groups in other fields. I'm absolutely open to anything, but
That's great.
I don't know if this matters, but accessibility, what would that look like once it rolls out? Would it open to all folks here, like what I'm asking, families who may be on two or have private insurance, but what is that accessibility?
yeah, that's a great question. I'm not entirely sure, but from what I've been talking with Dr. Han, it's gonna be later on accessible if the results that we gather, you know, is effective. Otherwise, it's not. We're just gonna pull the idea back, but if it's effective, then yeah, for sure. The app is free. We just have to give them a code and they're able to access the app. Yeah, question?
Yeah, I had a similar question. I worked with a cardiology fellow that had a background in coding and he developed apps for help patients in different ways. And I was wondering if that was your background, if you were interested in doing more technology, health, research.
Yeah, sort of actually. Like I hadn't really thought about it prior to like, you know, being involved with this project, but now that I've been into this, now that the project is starting up, I'm really liking the idea of like technology-based research because it just seems so cool. Just, you know, and like later on in the future, technology is going to continue evolving. You know, it's like how can we use this and further expand? So I'm absolutely into that.
We have a question in the chat. So from Daisha in the chat, do you have a sense of how this app or others like it work differentially for youth from marginalized communities?
It's an excellent question. From my understanding is that, like I mentioned before, like for instance, as at the moment it's only available in English, but later on when we're able to get the translation out, then we're going to be able to further expand into those marginalized communities because we understand that that's where the disparities lie. They're the ones that need it most. So until we get that going, we feel like it would be really beneficial for them.
So following up on, my question is completely different, but then now I'm curious. So like, as you're kind of moving forward, what are some of the demographics that you measure? So for example, I'm thinking of those with like health and service differences, maybe neurodiversity or other bits. Like I realize that you're screening for some of these in the exclusion criteria, but as we're kind of pulling forward, there's some surveys for understanding like disadvantaged background in these contexts. So to what extent are you measuring some of those bits for like pulling them together, I guess?
That's an excellent question. Can I get back to you on that?
Absolutely.
Because since it's, you know, your study, I'll
Yes,
definitely email you.
okay, and then, so know that we're nerding out in this area, so we actually have these measures that we can give to you, but the other bit is that, so in radiation therapy at OHSU, they're not using an app, but they're using virtual reality, augmented reality to help people navigate through. And so they're using very similar metrics before, after type of thing. And so what I'm, like, obviously different background in terms of adults, but I'm curious kind of like, how those measures and other things that you learn across these different supporting folks through surgeries, how they align. And I know that you don't have these answers yet, but have you seen radiation therapy either through when you were with like scholars or that virtual reality bit? Did you get to do that?
I didn't get to. I was always busy with my lab, so I wasn't able to do that with the program.
Yeah.
But I heard a lot about it, like just how immersive it was, you know, like at teaching people who don't know what it is and just getting familiarized, you know, with what radiation therapy is.
Might be a really interesting conversation
Yeah,
to talk
it'd
to
be really-
both those folks,
Yeah.
because it's different methodology, but still similar goals.
And I also have the app on my phone.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if like later during the poster presentation, if you would like to get a look at it, then I would be more than happy to show you.
Other questions? Hold on, Alex.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaida. I'm in the Computational Research Lab, and I'll be presenting on pediatric falls role versus prevention. Pediatric falls is the most frequent cause of morbidity and mortality in children as of now. It actually accounts for 25 to 34% of all urban trauma admissions. A study conducted between 1965 and 1969 actually found that there was 201 deaths in.
Excuse me, you can speak up a little, I can't hear.
No, you're fine. Okay, a study conducted between 1965 and 1969 found that there were 201 deaths in children under the age of 15 in the city of New York, which accounted for 12% of all accident deaths in that age range. This data heavily influenced the New York Health Department to pass the Children Can't Fly campaign. This campaign was initiated to spread awareness and enact preventive measures. Some of the services included preventive education and easy to install window guards for families. This campaign was very successful, as you can see on the graph. There was a 35% decrease in deaths due to falls from heights. This successful campaign encouraged New York to pass the nation's first ever child accident prevention bill on April 12, 1976, setting a historic precedent. Many states followed suit and passed similar laws as well, which all pushed for construction codes, preventive education, and they all had a tremendous impact in reducing pediatric falls. However, this is still an ongoing national crisis. As I mentioned above, there has been numerous studies that have proven this is a public health issue. However, there is minimal research on variations in outcomes and injury patterns between urban and rural settings. In addition, rural areas have yet to define injury patterns, which has led to a lack of preventive measures. This is very detrimental to this population because they live in an area where they don't have that much access to like level 1 or level 2 trauma hospitals, which means that if a child were to get injured, they would have to get transferred to an urban center, which would negatively affect their outcome. Which is why we aim to analyze the seasonal fluctuations, injury patterns, and frequencies that differ between urban and rural settings. We expect that pediatric patients who fall from height in rural areas will have a greater morbidity and mortality than those who fall from urban areas. This is a retrospective study, therefore we gathered our data from the Oregon Trauma Registry. We included patients 0 to 17-year-olds, trauma fall patients who were entered into the system, and we excluded those who did not survive long enough to be entered into the system. We defined urban areas as those less than 10 miles from the center of the city with 40,000 or more residents, and rural areas as those at least 10 miles from the center of the city with 40,000 or more residents. This figure right here is the variables that we collected from the Oregon Trauma Registry. So we included age, injury type, race, ethnicity, gender, morbidity, mortality, etc., and the location of injury. These are some of the results that we have observed so far. Most of our patients were males, 64% to be exact, and 36% females. And then this graph right here is the hospital that the patients were admitted to. As you can see, we had a big percent that were admitted into a level 1 trauma center, and we only have 2 in Oregon. So we have OHSU and we have Legacy Emmanuel. The other big percent was level 2s, and those are located in Salem, Eugene, those types of areas. Level 1s and level 2s are very comprehensive, and they can provide complete care for patients from preventative all the way to rehabilitation. Whereas level 3s and level 4s can only provide certain types of care. So they're very limited, and they're usually like geared towards stable patients. So if a patient were to get like severely injured in these areas, they would have to get transferred into either level 1 or level 2 center. As for the cause of injury, we noticed that most of our patients were falling from heights such as window, balcony, building, roof, falls from like one level to another, and we did see some trees. In the other category, you did see some falls that related to water, such as diving or jumping into water. Some patients fall from horses, fences, and some fell from vehicles, but all of these were less than 1%. This graph right here is where the patients went after being discharged from the ED. Most of our patients ended up either going home or being admitted into the floor. Some were transferred and some admitted into the ICU. And after the patients were done with their inpatient care, more than 90% ended up going home. Whereas less than 2% ended up going to rehab, and in the other category, we have some patients that ended up going to psych. We hope to conduct further analysis to determine seasonal injury variations, to really gather the difference between rural and urban settings. We hope that this data will help providers by enhancing triaging and transfer procedures, enabling less severely injured patients to receive care closer to home, and those who are more injured to get transferred to a level 1 or level 2 center faster. We also hope to aid in developing protocol and safety measures, essentially ensuring that pediatric hospitals are ready to treat their endemic populations, whether that is rural or urban. I would like to give a special thanks to the both Exeter and NIH, to the 20th Century Research Lab, to my research mentors, Samantha Underwood, Dr. Arvin G, and Dr. Mark. Questions?
Let's move forward. So traumatic brain injuries, I'm sure that happens with a lot of the AMD fall. Was your lab able to see or community about it for children who fell more likely to fall in the future or more likely to get another concussion or suffer any other consequences of falling?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, we have not done that yet. We're still like in the process of analyzing it. But we do have multiple studies going on TBIs, and that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, like if a patient would fall, especially like in rural areas, if they don't have preventative measures, what's going to keep that child from like falling over and over again, which is why we're like hoping the study will kind of set like a tone and kind of really focus on rural areas on like, hey, this is how you can prevent this from ever happening.
So I realize I have some bias. So in the urban versus rural, like when you were, before you presented your data, I was expecting, I was like, well, in rural, like, do they have elevation? Like I'm thinking of like multi-level buildings in rural environments, and like, then when you showed the various data, I'm like, oh, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. Were there any differences in how people were getting their falls across urban versus rural?
Yeah, in urban areas, we did notice that a lot of patients like fell from height. So like windows, balconies, which kind of makes sense. We're in urban areas.
Right.
But in rural, like they were a lot of patients from the playgrounds. We had a lot of patients that fell from like the arms of their parents, or like some would fall from chairs, some would like fall from like a non-moving vehicle. So it was kind of more unique when it came to rural areas, whereas like urban was kind of what we expected. Like, yeah, children that fall from heights, children fall from like certain areas.
And yeah, does the level of height matter? Like in like falling from my arms, again, bias, like that seems less far, not that you can't have significant impacts, but like less far than like 2 stories or like.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to kind of just analyze the injury variations and see like how a child gets like more injured if they're falling in rural area versus urban. Because urban, like the patients, if they fall from a height, they're gonna get severely injured. But the point of this is like a child would fall in a rural area, they would have less access to care than those in urban areas. So if a child would like fall here, they can quickly get transferred to OHSU or legacy, which like they're gonna have a better outcome than a child who gets injured in a rural area. The time it takes to transfer, the time it gets like takes like, just to get them stable, it's gonna make such a big difference.
Do you have a sense of what season you guys hypothesize there will be more fall-related trauma injuries?
I want to know that
That's a
too.
really good question. Unfortunately, we did not look at like the times that they get injured. If I were to hypothesize, I would say summer.
Yeah.
Just because that's when children are home, that's when they're playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I would think. So that's the.
That is a solid reason.
Yeah.
That is a solid reason. What other questions do we have in the room?
Do you have any data related to the school campus? Since it's a very important in the school. Do you have any comparison between the urban and the school campus?
Unfortunately, we did not look at it that specifically. We kind of just went into the trauma registry and kind of just looked at every child that fell that was introduced to the system. And there were some that like would fall from school, but they wouldn't specify that. It would just say, oh, they fall from a playground, they fall from a table, or they fall from here. It didn't specify the location of it, or that school.
I was thinking about the sort of an analogy to drowning, because kids can drown in very little, very just inches of water, little bits of, and the biggest thing that they say is to supervise your kids, like keep your eyes on them, don't let them wander all around the block or, you know, down the farm or whatever. So, is there any information about how long until these kids are found after they fall and whether that makes a difference? Because I think in an urban area, they'd be found more quickly than in rural cities.
Exactly, yeah. We have not looked at the time yet. But yeah, with the time thing, like if a child, what we're looking at is if a child looks like fall in rural area, how fast is that child able to get care, urban versus rural? And what we're trying to see is what difference does that make in their outcome? But that's a very good question. Yeah, I was very surprised with the water data that we had, because we had a lot of children like, falling from boats or just like kind of jumping in.
Hi, I just was wondering, I was in a pretty rough car accident. And thank God I'm alive, but I'm wondering, how long do you think the trauma will last? Because my neck blew up, my whole body blew up. I was in so much pain, it's like, oh God, am I gonna make it? And God gave me a miracle, but literally he hit me so hard, my spirit left my body. I was like dead for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then it stopped, and then God brought me back. And it's like, oh. So I'm happy to be alive, and I just want to know how long does that trauma pain last in your neck? Because it's like boom, 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 boom. And it's like, oh, I need to pray, Jesus. Can you help me, baby?
I wish I could. That's such a good question. I wish I could. If I was a doctor, I would definitely. Someday, yeah. Call me back in a few years.
I have a burning question, sorry. Do you feel like parental self-report is a confounder in this? Like the parents wouldn't admit that they took so long to get their kids to care?
I 100%. I think that some parents even like if a child reported like fall from height. Coming from like an ethnic background, I know that like a lot of people are afraid of like the cops or like repercussions, so they just don't go to the hospital, which is kind of why we are hoping that this study will heavily like encourage parents to like take action on the preventative action, like just work on preventing the whole thing from happening. But yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of parents who are their child will fall, like even financial wise. Some just might not have the money to take their child to the hospital. So that's why we're just hoping to kind of educate the parents and really, really emphasize prevention.
Yeah, and the goal of promoting this prevention does the study at all, provide suggestion or legislation in order to like take the responsibility off of the people and, providing safety for those windows to be closed or like proper, proper building structure in order to like further prevent that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. While I was actually doing like my background for this, I was kind of like, honestly, it was kind of like very encouraging because like it showed me what difference a study can do. Because the reason why we have that child accident prevention bill is because the researcher went out of their way to prove that this was needed, right? And that's kind of like my hope for this study. I hope that like people can see it and be like, oh my God, yeah, we definitely need to emphasize prevention for rural areas, and that these like areas can look at this and be like, okay, I hope that like people in upper places that like our legislators can look at it and be like, okay, yeah, we need to take action, we need to make a difference when it comes to this. So hopefully that's.
Lovely. So what's next for you? So where are you going, where are you heading next in the sense of like, oh, I really like this area and any insight?
Yeah, I really love pediatrics. I've been about pediatrics since I started, so I'm like, I really hope, I'm hoping to work with like my mentor and kind of like analyze this data some more and really find out like what's the difference between rural and urban settings and like see who's getting, like what their outcomes are, what the injury types are, and I hope that before I like end the product, so I get the answers that we need. And yeah, I think it kind of sparked my love for pediatrics, so I'm definitely like continuing that route.
Lovely.
All right. All right, hi everyone, my name is Habiba Ibrahim. I work with Dr. Akram Khan in his pulmonary critical care and acute medicine. My research was looking at the effectiveness of COVID vaccines, and specifically mRNA vaccines like Moderna and Pfizer, in minimizing the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation and death that is related to COVID. Just a little background, so COVID is caused, or it's a variant of SARS-CoV-2, and these kind of viruses are difficult because they change their genetic code, so it's really hard to crack down on them. We see that those that have the most or severe complication from COVID are the elderly, those more compromised, and those with chronic illnesses. However, almost anyone could get COVID. So we have been dealing with COVID for the last 2 years. A lot of people think that's kind of leaving, but it's now we just saw a spike in 20 of this year, 2020, January 2020 of this year. And just looking at the US, there has been about 94 million cases with about 70,000 new cases each day and 1 million deaths in just the past year. And when we look at Oregon, we see there has been 886,000 cases with 8,000 deaths. We also looked at the vaccinations information that we have so far because we're also interested to see how the number of doses you have affects the usage of IUD, which is a basic medical information. About 63% of the people worldwide are fully vaccinated, meaning 3 doses or more. 68% of the US population is fully vaccinated, and about 71% for the population is fully vaccinated. What we know thus far from COVID effectiveness is that it reduces the risk of COVID-19, it minimizes you having severe outcomes from COVID, and it reduces the risk of hospitalization. But we're still unsure about the vaccine's effectiveness and reducing the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation and death. And those are 2 things that we see that a lot of COVID patients end up on either ventilation or so our goal was to look at the effectiveness of the vaccine against IND and death, but we also wanted to see how this correlates to how many doses a person had and the different variants of COVID. Our study group were 2. There was cohort 1 and cohort 2. Cohort 1 were those that had a positive COVID test plus COVID symptoms, and then cohort 2 were those that had a COVID negative test that had COVID symptoms, essentially our control group. Our inclusion criteria was that you have to have either a positive or negative COVID test, 18 years of age or older. You have to have a COVID symptom within 14 days of your positive COVID test, and you have to be either hospitalized or in. After doing our screening, we would speak to the nurses, let the care team know about what we're doing, get consent for the patient, and explain our study objective. Then we would do a nasal swab and survey and ship this specimen to CPC and Vanderbilt. They did the analysis and then sent this back to the result. Our survey questions included things that we couldn't necessarily find in the medical history. If the patient had COVID before, if they have COVID vaccination and how many doses. We also looked at if the person has their influenza vaccine for this year, because part of the study was looking at influenza, but it focused on COVID for my presentation, and then their residency before hospitalization, if they were at home at a care facility and so on. So what did we find? We found that the vaccine was 88% effective in reducing death that is caused by COVID. We also found that when we looked at invasive mechanical ventilation and death combined, the vaccine was 90% effective in reducing the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation and death. And we found that it was 91% effective in reducing the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation. Like I mentioned, we also wanted to see what this means depending on how many doses a person has. So we looked at someone who has 3 doses, someone who had their second dose within 14 to 150 days of their positive COVID test, and those that had their second dose within greater than 150 days. And we found that those with 3 doses had the best reduction in the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation, followed by those who had their dose within 14 to 150 days, and lastly, those with greater than 100. We also looked at the different variants, pre-Delta, Delta, and Omicron. The one that interested me the most was Omicron, and we found that it had a lower reduction in IND and death. So that was the only one that was like an outlier compared to the others. So what does this all mean? This study again shows that vaccine is important and reducing the use of IND and death, and this can change in the care that we give and the standard care that we give. It also shows that how important it is to get vaccinated and to get fully vaccinated, because we saw those that had 3 doses or more were more protected. And then also that there was about equally the same effectiveness against the vaccine against the different variants except Omicron.
I just want to say thank you to my PI, Dr. Khan, my research coordinator for helping me center and assistant day and Jesus. And then I had both exo scholars in my lab, Cynthia, Aaron, Symposium, and Diana. And then thank you also for the NIH and both of them. This is my references. And then
Do you think that we're going to be take COVID vaccines every day, like we get a shot based on doses for those?
I'm not sure how it's working currently, but we do have a fourth booster that's coming out. That's very advertised to be taken. So like a lot of the healthcare staffs at the hospital are taking it, and we're all encouraged to take it. So I feel like maybe that is a possibility, but we still don't know.
It looked like the effectiveness.
Yeah, it did. So yeah, for those that had their second dose greater than that 150 days, had less protection. So I do anticipate that.
Were you able to look at cases where there was like COVID infections or someone who had been twice because they.
So we were only allowed to enroll the patient only once. So like there were patients that come and get readmitted again for COVID. However, we couldn't readmit them to the site.
Are they gonna come up with another vaccine, or will you, if you've already been fully vaccinated? Are they gonna recommend you take that next booster shot? Because I'm a little afraid to take another shot. I've had 3 shots.
Yeah, we saw that for those that were immunocompromised or had chronic illnesses, the more doses they had, the better protected they were, especially if you had multiple chronic illnesses. For example, just hypothetically, let's say the vaccine was 90% effective if you had diabetes. The effectiveness is going down depending on the extra chronic illnesses they had. So the more doses you take, the better or the more effective it was. So if you know you have chronic illnesses or you're immunocompromised, it's highly recommended.
And then if you're older, do you recommend that you should be able to do better? All I have is high blood pressure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it actually is better to take more doses because we see that COVID impacts a lot, the elderly, the immunocompromised, and those.
So it is safe.
Yeah, those vaccines definitely safe.
I don't think so. I have to kind of figure this out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That helps.
I was wondering if you saw any difference because you said you looked at Moderna and Pfizer for the vaccines. Is there a difference between the two?
We didn't see any difference between Moderna and Pfizer, and specifically because our research was looking at mRNA type of pathway, which is what Moderna and Pfizer is. However, we didn't look at Johnson & Johnson because that wasn't a mRNA vaccine, but we did see Moderna.
I have one. Was there a difference in outcomes for folks who had the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine versus those who only had the COVID vaccine?
We did not look at that specifically because when we were looking at those with either influenza or influenza vaccine, we looked at them separately compared to those with COVID. So we did not look at them or look at those who were vaccinated against influenza plus COVID.
Okay.
But this study, this is the third one we did, and then there's a fourth one, the second continuation. That one's going to focus more on influenza because we're expecting to see a spike.
Yeah.
I'll have more answer once we do that one.
I'll hit you up for that.
Oh, Matt, and then.
So your area of study is really unique in the sense that this is omnipresent for all of us for the last 2.5 years. Have you felt additional pressure to know everything?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous when I started because I felt like very lost, and like a lot of the people in my lab, they're doctors already, so they knew a lot more than I did. But I think the only difference that changes the way I talk about the vaccine when I'm telling like other people, because my family or in my community, they also are very skeptical about the vaccine. So the way I talk about it has definitely changed than the way I did before.
Very scary.
So I found out recently, and I have no idea about this, that some people get vaccinated against pneumonia, and bacterial pneumonia is one of the complications if you're on a ventilator and really serious for you. And I have no idea how frequently. Was that something, data that was collected in your study?
We did not look at that in specific. Our whole goal was to reduce the usage of invasive mechanical ventilation because we do know that a lot of people that end up on ventilation have a lot of
problems that could come from ventilation, so we're trying to reduce as much as we can. Especially when COVID was much more at the beginning of like 2 years ago, we were really trying to look for ways to reduce it because a lot of the patients were getting put on ventilation.
You were also tracking how many people who were on ventilation died, right?
Yeah, that was also part of it, but that's why we combined the invasive mechanical ventilation and death rate, and then we looked at that separately and ventilation separately as well.
If someone came in and there were like multiple things going on with them besides COVID, did we able to take that?
Yeah, so we looked at that in the case, we looked at what happens to someone who has multiple chronic illnesses and how having the vaccine protected them against the use of mechanical ventilation and death. And we found that the more chronic conditions we had, the less effective the vaccine was, but it wasn't less effective like drastically, it was just less effective compared to someone who is a healthy adult. But it was still very, very effective in using that.
So you mentioned that you obtained supervision response from individuals who had COVID positive and negative. How was that for you? Were you scared? Were you worried?
I was definitely scared when I was going into COVID patient test, especially my mom was like very worried about COVID because she has chronic illnesses. So she's like, do not bring COVID home. So I was like always coming back home, washing my scrubs like right away at the can. So it was definitely scary at the beginning, but then like the PPEs are very, very effective. Since it started, so that's great. Yeah.
So that segues amazingly. So I'm in public health. I feel overwhelmed with all of the COVID information, keeping up with it. So I don't know if any of you also feel that way. So there's a resource called your local epidemiologist, who's a professor out of Texas, who like, it's like, here's the CDC info, and here, and just kind of like helping to like frame what that is. My question to you is like, oh my goodness, this is like COVID all light, COVID all research, like home. How do you manage? Like, this is really emotionally intense and like ever present, like all together.
Yeah. I agree. It's definitely difficult because like I said, when we do the enrollment, we're essentially just looking at their medical records, seeing if they qualify. And it's really different just looking at the computer and getting the person's information, places going in, talking to them, trying to get their consent. So you honestly just have to be like empathetic and like try to be as understanding. And then sometimes I have like my peers, the other built excerpt scholars, where you don't feel comfortable going in. So I would go in with them, and then if they're like stuttering or if they're like pause, I help them. And then I also had the same thing, like at the beginning, I would pause a lot and I would stutter, so they would also help me as well.
Are you just done with COVID, like mentally?
Thankfully, we do a lot other studies that are not COVID specific. Like we're looking at intubation for one of our other studies, which is really interesting, and it kind of relates to this. So that's one of the other studies that I'm hoping to also work on after this.
Doing this work.
Yeah.
Questions?
Have you taken on the vaccine?
I have. I've taken all three, and the fourth.
The
is
fourth
coming out.
one too?
It's getting, our hospital is rolling it out now, so once it does come on.
You gonna take it?
Me too.
Okay, should I take it at 67?
I would think, yeah, but I'm not a doctor, but it is very effective.
Your research opinion.
Yeah, definitely very good.
All right, thank you.
We have one comment in the chat from Decatur Foster. She says, great presentation, Habiba, and great job answering all these questions.
Very good, thank you.
Next up, we have Liliana.
Okay.
All yours.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Liliana Diaz, and I am a rising senior studying public health and biology. And this is the study that I have developed and have been working at the Truckee Center Research Lab at OHSU, in which we are looking at how intersectional abilities might affect a person's functional outcome and health-related quality of life after they've sustained a traumatic brain injury. So what is a traumatic brain injury? Well, as the name suggests, a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, is an injury to the brain caused by sudden trauma. So this could be caused by a violent blow or jolt to the head, or by an object piercing the skull and damaging brain tissue. So the most common causes of TBI are falls, motor vehicle accidents, and assaults. And TBIs can be classified as either mild, moderate, or severe. So it is estimated that 1.5 million Americans each year sustain a TBI, and on average, around 230,000 require hospitalization. Those who survive their injury may have severe cognitive, behavioral, and functional and sensomotor impairments that impact their quality of life. Despite being a leading cause of death and disability, TBIs have been called the silent epidemic due to overall public awareness being low. So now, while anyone is at risk of sustaining a TBI, some groups do have a higher likelihood. They are also more at risk of sustaining a fatal TBI or of having severe cognitive and function impairments that impact their quality of life. So here are some examples of at-risk groups. Some factors behind these disparities include higher rates of motor vehicle accidents, higher rates of mental illness, and barriers in accessing appropriate and high-quality healthcare. So while there have been studies that keep you all in suspense.
I think you're pointing over here.
Let's see. No worries. Thank you. Okay. So while studies have already established that these disparities exist, most of them have evaluated these factors in isolation for each other. For example, they might have only looked at how sex and gender affect TBI recovery, or looked at only how being incarcerated might increase your risk. But in this study, we really wanted to look at all potential vulnerabilities all at once. Because as this diagram illustrates here, we know that they intersect with each other, and we know that they can compound on one another. And we also know that in reality, these don't exist in isolation from each other. Someone might be a person of color and also be a veteran and also be experiencing homelessness. So if they were to sustain a TBI, how would that affect their functional outcome? And additionally, we also wanted to take a before and after approach. So how would these factors contribute to their risk in sustaining a TBI in the first place? Let's do this, please. So to do this, we are employing a prospective cohort design in which participants who are admitted to OHSU diagnosed with a brain injury, or excuse me, a traumatic brain injury, and that meet our inclusion criteria will be enrolled. This will be a longitudinal study in which participants will be followed for 12 months following hospital discharge. So here's our inclusion criteria. We are requiring admission to the ICU due to the insurance that we chose for creating a baseline. And then we also didn't want to limit inclusion based on English language proficiency. So the only restriction is that their primary language must be one of the 40 offered by OHSU Interpreter Services. And then these are the metrics that we will be collecting from participants and later evaluating. So participants will be enrolled during hospital admission. At that time, we will collect demographic and contact information for them. And then prior to hospital discharge, we will evaluate them using the United Kingdom Functional Independence Measure and Functional Assessment Measure to create a baseline of psychosocial function. So the UK FIM is a validated tool designed to measure disability among patients with a brain injury. And these are the scales that they measure. And then after hospital discharge, follow-ups will be conducted every 3 months for 1 year. And during these follow-ups, which will be conducted either by phone call, text, email, or postal service, depending on indicated preference, we will evaluate participants' functional recovery and health-related quality of life using both the Glasgow Outcome Scale Extended, the GOSE, or the Medical Outcome Study 36-item short form health survey, as the 36. So the GOSE measures functional outcome versus the SF36 measures health-related quality of life. Now, as opposed to the UK FIM, these two surveys do rely on participant self-reporting, but they will still give us insight as to whether the participant is recovering functionality and whether or not their injury is affecting their quality of life. So we recently received IRB approval for the study, and we are currently screening and enrolling participants. Next, please. And I would like to thank everyone who has helped me in the study get this far, and I would love to take questions.
In UK, FIM survey, is that from the United Kingdom? Is that
Yes.
Why do you think there's not a universal screening that the US uses to
So-
determine something traumatic?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. So the UK FIM and FAM is actually based on the US FIM. So they just added, so it's the US FIM and then the UK added the FAM part, which just analyzes like additional criteria. So there is one for the US, and this one, it doesn't necessarily diagnose a TBI, it just kind of measures how has your injury affected your ability to do certain things, stress yourself, feed yourself, things like that.
In your research, did you find differences, type of activities?
Like in getting their injury in the first place?
Yes.
Yeah, so the most common causes are falls, so especially for older people, motor vehicle accidents are common, as well as assaults. Other ones that are listed are also suicides, so that's a piercing injury versus a blunt injury. Sports injuries are also other common cause, so there's a lot of different reasons why someone might sustain this injury.
I'm not sure if this question is appropriate to the study, but from a physiological standpoint, what is the exact causation of aggressive behavior from a TBI?
That's a really good question. Not one I'm well versed in. I can say that a lot of people who do experience TBIs will have a change in like cognitive function. And one of the treatments that really is required after TBI is a lot of therapy for mental health. However, that is not always accessible for everyone, and that is why one of the reasons why we see disparities in an outcome. If someone isn't able to access that therapy, then they might, have worse outcomes, and increased aggressions is definitely one of them.
I would. So did you include folks with ADHD or other impulse control disorders in this study, or were developmental disabilities in your exclusionary criteria?
Yes, that was in our exclusionary criteria, just because we found in our scope, it would be just a little too difficult to be able to figure out which one was that caused by TBI and which one is that already pre-existing. So, but for future for future research, that'd be definitely.
Yes, definitely a risk factor.
How do you feel
Yes, that's a good question. So we do have a framework selected for when our results come out. If we do, finish the survey or finish the study and we found that there are disparities among certain groups, we have this framework. I'm trying to remember the name of it. So it's published by the Institute of Medicine. It's called like the Unequal Treatment Social Ecological Model, I believe. And it basically, you use it to suggest intervention on 3 different levels. So you have the individual level, which is between the patient and the provider. And there's the hospital administration level, and then there's the larger societal policy level. So hopefully using that framework, we can kind of come up with some interventions, either preventative or afterwards, helping patients who might not have the access to the therapy and rehab that TBIs have to require, to hopefully, reduce these disparities.
Speaking of someone who's painfully aware of how hard it is to reach people after they leave the program, everyone feel like you're experts on this. What is the plan for trying to have outreach and reach people who have, it's every 3 months, but like someone who's experiencing homelessness,
Right.
what are these options for trying to get to people where they are?
Yeah, so definitely. So especially because this study is unfunded, I don't have like any incentives to offer. We do expect that there be a pretty high attrition rate. To kind of prevent that, we are collecting 4 forms of contact. So a phone number, a secondary phone number if they have it, a mailing address, and then a email address. And then also we're asking for additional contacts. So when people might be close to them. So we will exhaust all those options, hopefully to afterwards we try and do these follow-ups. And then we're not able to gain contact with them, we can try to contact the secondary contact with the assets. We just want to check, is everything okay, first of all? And then they just decide to withdraw from the study. So that is definitely one of the things that most have to struggle with, but I'm hoping that even with that, we'll get some good data.
Okay.